Welcome to our next video lesson. Today's video lesson is on the coordinate plane, and this is video lesson number 21. For today's lesson, of course, you need the notes you were given in class. That is TOC number 21. You will need a pencil or pen to take the majority of the notes, but you will also need highlighters, markers, or colored pencils to add some colors on the coordinate grid to help you understand as we go through the lesson. And calculators are allowed for this lesson, but they're really not needed, but it is part of the calculator section on your SOL. So our lesson is on the coordinate plane, and if you take a look at the picture at the very top of your page and the one right here in the middle of the screen, that is what the coordinate plane looks like. Now it's also sometimes called the coordinate system, so let's jump into some of the vocabulary terms to help you get through this lesson. If you look at the bottom of your page, we're starting with that first term, the coordinate plane, or sometimes it's called the coordinate system, and that is formed by the intersection of two number lines at a point that meet at their 0 points. And their 0 points are right here where that green arrow is pointing in the middle, and we have the horizontal number line that we're used to that goes from negative to positive numbers. And then we have the vertical number line, which is like the thermometer we looked at when we studied integers away at the beginning of the year. We talked about that zero's in the middle, and then as the temperature climbs higher, it goes up. But if it drops lower, it goes down into the negatives. So that's basically how we form our coordinate system and our coordinate plane. The coordinate plane, you can see, is like a railroad track or grid of all of these numbers, and you're going to be plotting points at their intersection. So you're going to be following these lines and putting points where those lines meet. It's basically like playing a little puzzle or solving a little logic puzzle or something like that. It's not hard. It is fairly easy, but just pay attention because students mix up the order of the numbers, and that's why they miss these. So if you look at the first axis is what they're called. Those are our number lines. And the first axis we're going to look at is called the x-axis, and that is the horizontal number line on the coordinate plane. Remember, horizontal is like the horizon. It goes from left to right. It's flat. So if you think of looking at the horizon, if you're out looking at the ocean and you're looking at the horizon, it's from left to right. It's not up and down. So you can use a highlighter, and please go ahead and highlight your x-axis on the little picture in the middle of your page at the top, and then go ahead and label the x-axis. And if you want to add that that's the horizontal number line, that's important to know as well. And another point to notice that the positive numbers on your x-axis are always on the right of the 0, or because they overlap at 0, it's to the right of the y-axis. And the negative numbers are going to be to the left of 0 on the number line. All right, our next part of the coordinate plane that we're going to be looking at is the y-axis. And this is the vertical or up and down number line on the coordinate plane. So again, we start at 0, and then we're going to go up for the positive numbers and down for the negative numbers, and that makes up our y-axis or the vertical number line. Go ahead and label this at the top, and then if you want to make a note that the positive numbers are above 0, or since 0 is where the x-axis is, the positive numbers are above the x-axis and the negative numbers are going to be below the x-axis on this number line. Okay, so some other things that you need to know. So we just talked about x-axis being the horizontal number line and y-axis being the vertical number line, or the number line that goes up and down. Well, now we're going to talk about an x-coordinate, which is basically the point on the x-axis and then the point on the y-axis. And you're always going to have 2 points together to find out the location of where we're trying to get to. So the x-coordinate is the first number in what's called an ordered pair, and I'll explain that in just a minute. And that number corresponds to the x-axis. So x-coordinate, x-axis, that kind of makes sense. So basically the x-coordinate is where you're going on the horizontal number line. And it's either going to be positive, so that means you go to the right, or it's going to be negative, and that means you go to the left. But we always start at 0. And so the y-coordinate, since the x is where you are on the x-axis, the y-coordinate is where you're going to be on the y-axis, and it is the second number in the ordered pair that corresponds to the y-axis. And so you're probably saying, what's an ordered pair? I have no idea. Okay, so an ordered pair is a pair of numbers, and it looks like what we have here in your notes. It's a set of parentheses, and it's got a number on the left and a number on the right, and they're separated by a comma. That's called an ordered pair. And the first number is where they are on the x-axis, and the second number is where we are on the y. And it's used to identify or describe the location of a point on the coordinate plane. So up above, I'm going to have you write this in just a little bit, but an ordered pair basically is x, comma, y. And an easy way to remember that is x before y. You must walk the x before you fly the y. And that kind of helps you remember. So you got to walk the horizontal number line before you can fly up or down. So we'll explain this. It'll come together in just a little bit. I know this is a lot of words we're throwing at you. Hang in there. All right. So the origin is another word that you have to know. And you think of what the word origin means. It is the beginning. It's where you start. So the origin is the point at which the x-axis and the y-axis intersect, and it is represented by the ordered pair 0, 0, because it is 0 on the x-axis and it's 0 on the y-axis. And the origin is important because that is the point where we always start when we're graphing. So it's right here in the middle. We're going to put a little dot there and label it the origin, and make sure you know that its coordinates are 0, 0. So if we say, what's the location of the origin? You would say, oh, it's 0, 0. Okay, the last word that you have to know for your vocabulary is something called a quadrant. Now, if you think what we talked about before, quadrilaterals had 4 sides. Quadrants are the 4 sections formed when the 2 perpendicular number lines intersect to divide the coordinate plane into sections, and they are labeled with Roman numerals. Okay, so I drew this C on top of the coordinate plane, and you can do that with a highlighter or lightly with your pencil if you have it, because you're going to label other parts. And the C is for a coordinate system. But if you think about where you start to make your C, you start in the top right, and that's quadrant 1. And quadrant 1, again, we label it with Roman numerals, so it's just like a capital I. And it's important to know that with your quadrant 1, all of your values are going to be positive. So your x coordinate is going to be positive and your y coordinate are going to be positive, and that describes the location for quadrant 1. With all of these quadrants, you not only have to be able to name them, but it's very helpful if you can memorize what the values are, or at least be able to know how to find out if they're positive or negative, because then you'll know by looking at a point which quadrant it would be in, and it'll make graphing a little bit easier. Okay, so if we follow the C, going from the top right, we're now going to go into the top left, and that would be quadrant 2. And if you think about this one, our x's are now on the left side, so that means that all of our x values are going to be negative, and our y values are still above 0, so they're positive. So these, in quadrant 2, the x's are negative and the y's are positive, so they're negative positive for their values. And then if we continue going around that C, we're going to drop into the lower third, the third quadrant, which is on the lower left, and that would be quadrant 3. And on these, the x value is negative, but we're also below 0, so the y values are also negative. So this one is negative, negative. And then we're going to end in quadrant 4, And with this one, our x values are on the positive side, but we are below 0 on the vertical number line, so it is a positive negative value. So if you can, go ahead and write these on the top part so you know. And again, it's helpful. You have to memorize how the quadrants are named. They're named like a C, and they go counterclockwise. But if you draw the C on your coordinate plane, you'll be able to remember how they are named. And then if you can memorize their positive, negative values for each quadrant, that's going to help you moving forward. Okay, and then the last little bit I want you to know is, what do you have to be able to do when you're given a coordinate plane? So the first thing you have to do is graph a point that is given to you. So for example, if I said graph -3, 5, and then label it A, then I have to look and say, okay, well, what does -3, 5 mean? Well, remember, coordinate on the coordinate plane in our ordered pair, the first number is our x. Remember, x before y, walk the x before you fly the y. So if you think about your ordered pair, the -3 is where we're going to go on the x axis, and then the 5 is where we're going to go on the y axis. So start at 0. We're going to go over -3 to the left because that's negative, and then we're going to go up 5, and that's where our point would be, and we'll label it with a capital A. So that's the first thing you have to be able to do, is when I get an ordered pair, know where it is on the coordinate plane. The second thing you have to be able to do is, if you're given an ordered point like this one and it's labeled M, you have to know the ordered pair and be able to write the ordered pair for that point. So on this one, again, we're going to start at 0. This time I'm going +7, and then I'm going down 1, so it'd be -1. So my ordered pair is +7, -1. Remember, when it's a positive number, we don't have to write that little plus sign to show it's positive. It's understood to be positive. So those are the two things you have to be able to do: graph a point and then identify the location using an ordered pair. The last thing I want you to do is make sure at the very top of your page we went through these notes as we were going through the vocabulary, but I want you to go ahead and pause the video, take a second, and copy these down on top of that coordinate grid. And when you're done, you can restart the video. Before you get to the very end, I do want you to draw a star in quadrant 4. You can draw it anywhere in quadrant 4. I just want you to draw a star in quadrant 4, and that will be so when we're looking through your notes, we know you listened to the video. So again, pause the video, copy this down, and then when you're done, it's time to show what you know.